You're listening to Asian Provocation. I'm your host, Ayoto Ataraxia. I'm really excited for you to listen to this episode. It's with Fan Popo. You might already know him. He's a documentary filmmaker, film critic, LGBT activist from China. His documentary, Mama Rainbow, was a very well-publicized legal case against the Chinese state media regulator about the censorship over the film. What is really exciting for me about this conversation is that it's a start for me to start bridging this gap between ideas that's happening within and outside of China. There's a new conceptual Great Wall of China, whereby it's very difficult to know what is actually happening on the either side of the divide. I feel a sense of urgency as we are more and more divided. And so how do we discuss issues without being reliant only on prejudice and projection? I was really excited watching your films. There was one on your website that was about your parents.
Not my parents, but parents in China.
Right.
I was asked a few times why you didn't include your own parents, but I think that is another narrative, because your own parents will be much more emotional than when you are interviewing other people's parents. I came out to them like more than 10 years ago. In the beginning, it was quite hard. They had hard time in the beginning, but eventually they accepted.
Did you know other people in that time that came out to their parents? How did you know how to do that?
There was during progress of my documentary shooting when I was interviewing other parents, and I suddenly came out to my own parents. So that really actually helped me a lot because I sort of know the technique of coming out. There is no certain standard answer or standard solution how you can what's the best way to come out to your parents, but I know some tricks like how you can make them feel they should not force you to do anything. And luckily also my parents were quite open-minded, even they were not that well educated, but they can think everything from another perspective and put themselves into my shoes. So after a few months it was okay. But I didn't put that in the list because that was a kind of a previous me, and I don't know how connected it would be for you. So I only it was only a few days before our interview, so I didn't give you all the links. I think it would be a little bit too overwhelming, especially I made really a lot of documentaries and feature length. But if you are interested, I can still send you the links.
A child counts in Mandarin. We see a series of Chinese children and their parents. When I grew up in Australia and Taiwan, there were so many anti-China propaganda. The fear of communism and the propaganda for certain democratic freedom and ideology. But through the process, the idea of China and the Chinese has been reduced to nothing more than a concept of fear. In 2012, Popo made a documentary titled Mama Rainbow, featuring 6 Chinese mothers who talk freely about their experiences with their gay children. I wanted to include the fathers, Popo says, in the documentary, but didn't find any fathers willing to participate in the film. Where are the Chinese dads, he asked. A video appears as the music continues. A son speaks. His mother holds on to him. As he speaks while looking away into nothing, there's no voice recording, but immediately I'm reminded of the way I would talk to my own mother. He looks past her, fearful, as though he might shatter if he would face her with his voice, his story. The mother holds on to him, deep into his eyes, almost as if she's saying, "I'm listening, son. I'm here." It's a film about the parents of the children who themselves seeks to learn about the children, but slowly learns about themselves. I realize over and over again that the rejections and fight people may have to keep others from being themselves is that they have not had the ability or space for them to accept their own struggles and pains.
因为现在家里边老人也需要照顾。如果说是将来未来的话，有机会到我女儿，比如说该谈婚论嫁时，我会带她来参加咱们这些活动，让她来感受。你自己的苦你还不知道吗？
One of the closing scenes features a man on a microphone. He says, The one who suffers is still my wife. She still refuses to disclose it. The old people in our family needs care. When the time comes, I will bring my daughter to events like this, to experience this, and understand her own self. Otherwise, do you not know your own pain?
这时的我站在水里，也不知道自己想啥，可我知道我是什么，就算死了也要开花。可我明
You also did the book 100 Years of Queer Cinema that was published only in Chinese in China, right?
Yeah, 100 films, not
100
years.
films. Okay, 100 films.
But almost 100 years covered. Yeah, so that was a really old book. And my friend always joking, now we can only see it in the secondhand bookstore because it was published in 2007 before I graduated from Beijing Film Academy. I studied there from 2003 to 2007. I studied film writing. At that time, I was trying to find a different opportunity, write essays and paper about queer films. But when I was trying to look into the archive and in the library, search any book on that, especially for Chinese books, there was literally no books about this specific topic. And then I got this idea, why don't I just publish a book myself?
How did you get all the access to all these films in China in that period? I imagine it's not so easy.
Oh my God, actually it was quite easy, but unfortunately all through pirated DVDs. So when I went to film school, even before I went to film school, when I was in high school, I already visited the pirated DVD shops frequently. So I got to watch filmmakers like Cai Mingliang and Fassbinder, Almodovar, all those film masters through pirated DVD. Even until now, I think copyright is not a big issue in China. Even it is illegal, but there is so many loopholes you can slip in. And I got to watch a lot of those DVD. It's quite funny, even unfortunately it was harmful to filmmaker, to their benefit, but somehow give film culture a certain diversity in China. And even when some famous filmmakers visited China, and I got to meet them and like give them a city tour. And some of them would say, "Oh, Popo, can you take me to a pirated DVD shop? I want to see my DVD pirated."
Yes.
The pirated version in China. And a lot of them were very excited. Oh, wow. And they even bought their own pirated DVD and taking picture of them and brought them back to the US. So it was really great memory for me, because when we were in film school and, we have these regular screenings every Tuesday and Wednesday. Even the censorship was much more relaxing than outside of film school, because we do this in the name of research or study. So you got to see some uncensored films. So I remember we screened Brokeback Mountain in China, and it was so many people, because it was screened in film. 35mm film. I assume it was the only opportunity to see it on the big screen. Outside of the censorship system, also they screened with Thai subtitles, because our film school just borrowed a copy from Thai Film Archive, and so many people want to watch it, but it was totally our privilege to study in film school. But somehow for people who are outside of this film profession and business, it is hard for them if there is no pirated DVD existing.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I loved also the DVD stores. Also in Korea, at the time they have these DVD bungs where you can go watch a DVD and you can sit in these massive rooms and you can smoke or have sex or have whatever you want to do. But that's actually where I got a lot of my Korean cinema education. And same in China. I find that the access and the cataloging is much better than any commercial system. And I always joked, if I ever make a film, my measure of success would be that if I can find it in a pirate environment, that means I've really made it. I think it's quite sad today where there's actually so much fantastic films, but most people have no access to all these works.
Personally, I have very complicated relationship with piracy because even though I benefit a lot from piracy DVDs of my study, but still now if I got a chance to support filmmakers, I will do it, because as a filmmaker myself, I know how important it is to of your own work to feed yourself, unless there is no access. So
right.
I might try to find it in different ways, but I will always being supportive to my colleagues in the film industry.
And how was the book received, and was there difficult pressure from the government for putting out such a book?
I got in touch with this publisher. She told me, well, let's try. It is difficult, but maybe it will work. We were introduced in 2004 or 5. And then 2005 suddenly told me, oh, well, we got the permission, but you had to finish it within a month. Our plan is to write about 100 films. How come I can finish in a month? Otherwise, it will be not available anymore. So I literally in that month, I didn't go to sleep at all. So I keep on watching film, writing, but in the end, I managed to finish in about 2 months. And so until now, I have a lot of regrets on my writing. And some of them I was writing at 4 a.m. And I have to go to class at 8 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, I was sleeping in my class. So I have a lot of regrets on the book. But then she disappeared after I sent her all the articles. After almost 2 years, in 2007, someone told me, oh, Popo, you wrote a book, but you didn't give me a copy. That's so awful of you. Why didn't you send me a copy? I said, what book are you talking about? And then she took me to the bookstore. And I said, what? This book was published. I even didn't know. And I called my publisher. And she was like, really? It was published? It was published? And she was also confused. That shows how unstable the censorship system is. So all of a sudden they got it on, and then they could not, and then all of a sudden the press just published it. But it helped me a lot, and I got a little bit money from that. So that's why I didn't follow the common routine of my classmates. So usually they will go to film business and writing for TV theory and soap opera or commercial film, but I thought I could just do something else. That's why I started my documentary filmmaking. And this book was quite also well reacted, even though I said I have a lot of uncertification of it. But until now, when I meet some young people, they will say, oh, you're the author of that book. I read that book when I was in high school. It helped me a lot. And I was like, oh my God, so that make me feel so old. Some young people told me that they read my book in high school. But obviously that time, film was such an important way for them to open up themselves. And a book about a film would also be such a big collection for them to find the different films. So I'm proud of what I did.
I think it's so important, this building or passing on ideas and knowledge. Because you've been in Berlin for 3-4 years?
Yeah, 3.5 years now, almost.
Do you notice the difference, let's say the prejudice and also the pressure from government control versus living in Germany and the different kind of pressures or prejudice against LGBTQ issues or race issues? Is it different for you?
Yeah, it's very different. It's very different. And I would say in China, obviously the censorship is there, and it is so unstable, and there is no clear bottom line, what you can do, what you can't do, but they sort of erase the image of LGBT on purpose. And sometimes some regulation literally has the word, and no homosexual, no transsexual. They use term 变性人 which means transsexual. Of course, in the official government document, they won't say transgender or trans. But here in Germany, you don't. It's not censored that way by the government document, but a lot of censorship I feel was invisible. I don't know if we should call it censorship or not. But you feel when you realize being a people of color, being Asia, you are so still underrepresented in the society. There is no regulation against this. But when you try to present your work, your project to a producer, usually they don't show interest. So this is somehow make me feel being Asia is quite similar compared with being LGBT in China. And you are allowed to exist, but somehow you are not seen in the society because they don't represent you on media. But of course, behind these phenomena, there are different ideology, but you can somehow compare them. And I've been thinking about this a lot after I moved to Germany. When I moved here, I was thinking of, I will be a new person. I will give up my identity politics. I want to do different kind of films. I don't have to be queer. I don't have to be LGBT. I don't necessarily touch topics that is so identity politics driven. But then after I came here, I feel, wow, there is such a importance for me to represent my identity, not only queer, but also Asian. And so I pick up identity politics again.
Actually, your friend's podcast, she had one of these episodes, and they were talking about also LGBTQ issues. But one of the things that they touched on was the question of race, and that it's something that's even more difficult because one of the person was identifies as a trans person, but for them, it was more difficult to talk about race, and it was more easy for them to speak about sexuality. And in your film, The Drum Tower, which is the first film in China where both leading performers are transgender and one plays even a cis male role, what I loved being in Beijing was this discovery of the queer community in Beijing, that even though all of this pressure, this solidarity amongst especially the younger generation, do you think that it's changing, especially now, even this period with the boom of podcasting and more communication and discussion? Do you feel like as a generation in China, there's more acceptance over time?
I think generation definitely makes sense. The younger generation is not necessarily because they are naturally more open-minded. It is more because of what kind of information they received. With the new media and social media and self-media, there is certainly more space for images such like gender and sexuality diversity to present it. Even under this censorship, you can always try to post your program again. You can post your article with, if it doesn't pass the censorship and recognized by AI, you can put it into a picture and you can flip it. And for them, there is certain trend of in the subculture or featuring about sexual and gender minorities. But on the other hand, I have to say, those representations sometimes could be very stereotype. Another stereotype on minorities, such like, to describe those young girls who are obsessed by Japanese manga of boys' love. There are so many young girls fancy those kind of art, appreciate those kind of art, but somehow those manga represented the gay community in a very extraordinary way. And my niece, she's 20 years old now, and she's a big fan of those boys love manga. So when we came out to each other, so I came out to her as being queer, and she came out being a boys love fan. So she would ask me, so uncle, are you top or bottom? Or in another words, say, are you aggressive or passive? So gong and shou is the term in Chinese. And I was like, oh my God, I was not imagining that one day I would talk with my niece about those kind of position. So I have to tell her, oh dear, a lot of people are beyond those two positions. and then not everyone can suit into the binary word. But she could not understand it. She said, "Oh, really? Why? I thought all gay men has to be either top or bottom, otherwise who you are." So we had a long conversation, and I educated her, and she told me also about her confusion about sexuality, and explained to me of the Fujoshi word, and so I also learned a lot from her. But I think without those kind of opportunity, a lot of people would also project a lot of stereotype what they see from those subcultures. It could be somehow harmful to the representation too.
Okay, wait, hold up. So what is a Fujoshi? So in my time growing up, if you were into anime as a young adult, that had an overwhelmingly male cast, you might say that the intended audience was obviously clear, to show for male fans. However, this is not at all the case nowadays. Enter Fujoshi. Think of it like a certain kind of lesbian porn that is intended not for female lesbians, but for the male gaze of young boys. This is the reverse idea. Fujoshi is a self-mocking term that literally means spoiled girl, and refers to female anime fans who are crazy for attractive male characters, and imagine them in relationships with one another. Fudanshi is the less utilized male counterpart. The female fan knows that the narrative of her favorite shows isn't explicitly gay, but that doesn't keep her from imagining them in that spoiled way. Spoiled with massive air quotes. Over the years, the genre grew as female fans' spending power increased. Although the shows were intended for children, some of the characters were portrayed so beautiful and so handsome that an unexpected consumer of this genre is actually housewives. So there's a new phenomenon of female otakus, which was traditionally associated only with men, who are obsessed with computers or a particular subject of pop culture to the detriment of their social skills. Fascinatingly, when the term was associated with men, society generally looked down on these people. But now, there's a WikiHow on how to date an otaku girl. So the problem with Fujoshi is that the gay men are fetishized. It's fascinating the similarity that these issues have with fetishizing lesbian porn catered for men, as well as fetishized Asian porn. One can also fetishize gay men through anime. One main problem is that you could be accepted as a gay man, however you're incredibly uncomfortable because people only view you for sexual reasons. So you made this film Floss, which is about two men and the difficulty of sharing with your loved one your fetish and the inability to communicate. And there is this difficulty, isn't there, where if you don't have the language to explain and express these values, and if, for example, your only input and experiences to know, okay, there's a top and bottom, but you don't really understand or see, or there is no conversation, then how can people know? I see even with my parents, let's say on the topic of coming out, I think I would need to have these experiences or workshops where I can maybe learn how to communicate with them and them with me to speak about these things. I wonder, how does the community in China, or maybe it's not happening, like are people having taught languages about fetish or about expressing yourself to each other?
It's super underground. For the sake of research on this film, I got in touch with some people from the fetish and BDSM community. Before that, I was only in touch with some individuals. But then when they introduced me to this expert on bondage, who also did the bondage for me in the film on my actor, they have to be very careful because in China there is no law against BDSM exactly, but there is law against group sex. So having sex between more than two people is super illegal. So they have to be very careful before playing. And on the other hand, they are super stigmatized in the society. When you talk about such topic, it's not always that open, especially if you are in a smaller town. So that's why I want to make this film featuring a certain kind of atmosphere that is not very easy for you to come out, even though maybe in big cities it is easier for you to come out as gay man, and you can have your own relationship, but still for everyone there is certain secret could be difficult for you to expressing to other people, no matter strangers or even your partner who is supposedly the most have the most intimacy with you, but somehow it is difficult to communicate. And here in Germany, I can see that, oh wow, everyone would say, oh wow, you're in Germany, you're in Berlin, this is the capital for fetish, for strange kind of sex. But I still feel, this is my critical also with this film, to criticize the fetish scene in Berlin is very, very consumingized or capitalized. So if you want to be in the BDSM community, and very often you have to have a certain customer, and you have to have a certain toy, you have to spend money going to a certain party, you didn't know someone, you need to dress, and how you dress, how you look like, and what do you play are all very with the displaying of body. So flaws, when I have this idea about featuring, someone might just have a fetish on dental floss, which cost almost nothing, but there is a lot behind it.
I was really laughing at the genius of it, and it does feel just a variation of a society that itself is rebelling against. There is still a lot of social codes and behaviors and outfits. I found it was funny that in some ways, if you go to a fetish club or party, it's supposed to be against the heteronormative systems, but after a while, I find that still it has itself a pattern. And if you go against that and do something different, it becomes again taboo. And to do something very quote unquote normal becomes super taboo. And your 2019 film Beer Beer, which you are starring in it with Sebastian, a local German man, and the two of you try to walk and get a beer and talk about the interracial discussions that I find very relatable. The part where he tells you shocked that you're getting a kebab because he's vegan, which I think is also another really funny thing that, especially in the communities here, and taboo behind that too. And there's a kind of totalitarianism within the fetish community of how you can and cannot behave. How is it for you in the 3 years in terms of dating or playing or interacting with the different cultures?
I would say my observation of the queer scene in Berlin, or generally on racial issues with intersectionality of queer and race, I feel a lot of people here can pretend to be politically correct, but in bottom of their heart, they have a certain narrow mind. Just like what the example you said about vegan issue. And now it's also extremed by the COVID situation, because everybody was talking about, this virus was from the bat. That's because in Asia, they eat everything. And I literally had an argument with someone when I went to Hassenhat this summer. And so he was telling me, when will China stop the fresh market? Why in China they should stop all the fresh market? Have you been to those fresh market? And why you assume they are all selling stuff like crocodiles or bats or wild animals? Actually, most of the fresh market just look like what it is, like Kaufland or Lidl. If you want to shut down all the fresh market in China, you should also shut down little Edeka here. And then he said, anyway, I think humans should not eat meat, and we should stop eating all kind of meat. And I said, wow, yeah, then you should also go to close all the farms in Texas, and you should stop the fishing industry in Norway, but not only talking about what is happening in China. So this obviously really upset me, and because I went there for the purpose of social. And after this summer, like everybody has been locked down at home for such a long time, you want some fresh air or even some interesting encounter after being on your own for a very long time, but it's only destroy dynamic. So I had so many experiments like that, and so what you can see in Beer, even not all the stories are from real life, but a lot of them has some hints from what I had experienced, or sometimes even it's so creepy, and some lines I wrote in my script and later on happened in real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like someone was about to ask me something, and then a reaction, I was like telling myself in my heart, don't say that cliche stuff. don't be the one in my script. But that person in the end just exactly said what I wrote in my script after I wrote it. So it was so somehow prove that what I wrote is very realistic.
Yeah, it's coming from somewhere.
Yeah, it's coming from somewhere, but it's such a cold fact that people really act like that. So I call it micro racist. It's not totally obvious racism against you, but they think what they said is correct, but really doesn't always fit you with their stereotype.
You did this really nice short for RBB. It has you cooking some bats and some toy bats, just for you to know, but I'll leave the link there as well for people to watch. I like the jovial approach to play lightheartedly about the subject, but in actuality, I think it's a very serious topic and discussion.
Yeah.
I'm also finding the importance of bringing humor into some of these discussions. Not to say it's not important and we should joke about everything. At least it's a way to bring some lightness for ourselves, but also for people to watch it. But maybe it doesn't put people in so much of the defensive to feel that they are having to explain or prove themselves. But maybe in the joke, hopefully people can reflect. But I don't know. For example, the last bit of the short, you recorded that scene, right? Where the guy was verbally abusing you in the subway. Did he punch you?
No, he was spitting at me.
Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You crazy mother.
Hallo Chef, mein Name ist Popo Fan Popo. Auf chinesische bedeutet Steiger.
In October, Fan Popo appears on RBB, the public broadcaster for federal states of Berlin and Brandenburg. The video starts off with the toy bats of boiling water, with ironic, sinister music playing in the background, as a pair of chopsticks stir the bats, addressing the absurdity of the conspiratory theory that sits in our heads. The idea that COVID came from China because the Chinese are eating bats. The title appears, Four Walls Berlin, Learn German in My Kitchen, a film from Popo Fan. He introduces himself, inserts a self-mocking laughter track to lighten the mood. We're taken into his kitchen to learn German, as Popo Fan explains vitamins and carrots. Then the last ingredient to
Nein, ich habe nie eine Fledermaus gegessen.
No, explained Popo. I never eat bats. But casually, back to the cooking show, he makes jajang noodle, explains a dish which also originates from Wuhan. This is where the triggering footage comes in. According to German privacy laws, RBB is not legally allowed to publish the film footage of the man who spat on Fan Popo on the subway. The footage of the hate crime, where the man verbally abuses him and spits on him.
Der Virus, 病毒
Corona, two Corona. No, ich bin deine Mutter. Du bist Corona. Fuck China, the Politik, Diktator, the Politik, China. Fuck you. Fuck the dictator in China.
Coronavirus unterscheidet nicht zwischen...
The face had to be blurred out. The voice had to be changed. Popo returns with the statement, coronavirus does not differentiate between nationalities. And us? It blows my mind that despite the fact that this man commits hate crime, we're still obliged to protect his identity when it comes to revealing the evidence of the offense.
Oh, I had to change the tone of his voice for the sake of privacy. You know,
That's really
the
funny.
European privacy law is so strict.
That is
we
so
had
funny.
Put the pixel on his face and also change his voice. So
Despite
that's,
the fact the
according to
man was, I mean, I think in the US now, if you spit on somebody, you can be arrested. But still, we're protecting his, which I kind of, I'm not saying we should all find this man and lynch him and publicly attack him. But the fact that he spat at you, gave you so much profanities, telling you the worst possible racist things, we have to blur out his voice and blur out his face. On my last interviews, my guest asked me that, do I think there's a higher tolerance for people to accept racism against Asians?
Oh yeah, I heard that episode. I do agree. Because now it is such a shitty word that they don't realize because Asian was considered to be the successful community, the successful minority, and the model migrants or stuff like that. Those cliche that don't even think how we have been suffering. And especially after this COVID shit, so many cases about how Asian community, Asian individuals are targeted. Honestly, this was the video you see was not my first encounter. It was at least the second obvious attack in public space. And I won't tell you what is really worse, that there were people around me and nobody gave a shit to that. They were just seeing me being attacked by that person. And afterward, that day, that thing happened in the U-Bahn. There was a lady just beside me and just telling me, oh, you should not do that. You should not, he looks quite dangerous. You could be in danger. You should not just, you should just run away. I said, no, why? I should just run away. It's not my fault. And the other one happened in 2 years ago, in beginning of 2019. There was someone at the Kutbasator just shout to me, fuck China, fuck you, because we were speaking Chinese. I was speaking Chinese to a friend visiting from China. Afterward, she told me, Popo, I really don't feel comfortable to go back to that area, because I'm so scared to meet that person or anyone else like him again. So I don't feel safe in this city. And Berlin was considered to be the most diverse city in Germany, and proud of its tolerance on gender, sexuality, race. But in fact, there is so many corners and so many encounters could make you traumatized and paranoid. That's such a shame. But what I want to tell you is that the reason why I put all those humor into it, because I don't want to lose the ability of being, not say optimistic, but being funny and being joking. Because firstly, I don't want to put myself into the position of a victim, because we all should be empowered and self-empowered. We have our own way to express ourselves. We have our power. We have our culture behind. We have our community supporting. And I don't want to say I'm just so vulnerable. I could be vulnerable sometimes, but I'm not always. And I want to keep this optimistic way to see my life. And to love, to touch, to be touched. And I don't want to lose this. And secondly, it is my way of healing. So after I had that encounter in the subway, and I have a week, I of course that it's also the lockdown happened right after that. I was lying in my bed and quite had a certain time of difficulty communicating with other people, and I didn't realize how much I traumatized from that experience. And until now, I kind of don't want to take public transportation, partly because of the virus, but also partly from the experiments. Then I got this opportunity to make this 2 minutes video commissioned by RBB and produced by Basis Berlin, a production company here in Berlin. And I said, within these 2 minutes, I want to put information that I want to deliver. Also have different energy into it from in the beginning in a funny and humor way. And in the end, I want to also make people to think, to really reflect about the world.
Yeah, I really definitely get that vibe from it. I think many people are coming to very similar conclusions, or at least a process of how to deal with this, because I think the Chinese cultural background is a very proud, strong, I mean, the people have gone through so much, I think COVID is nothing compared to what's happened the last 100 or thousands years. So there's a kind of resilience, but at the same time, the combination with a lot of the philosophical transitions that we're going through right now in terms of trying to be vulnerable at the same time and seeing the trauma, admitting to the trauma, which I think sometimes I see my parents or an older generation that it's very difficult to even discuss some of these issues, let alone be a victim, because it's like, no, what problem? There is no problem. And I think that's also another difficulty. The last one that you did this year, Hey Zero, which is now out on X Confessions, which features a black man and a white woman, but playing the AI characters and a little glimpse of how they might be getting it on in their own world. Can you talk a little bit more about the process of coming up with a script for this piece?
Yeah, so that is a project that I'm really proud of. What I did this year. So back to a few years ago, I shot a porn called The Hutong Vibe, and then it was showing at a Berlin Porn Film Festival. At that time, I was in touch with the company of Erika Lust, and they want to have a collaboration with me. And eventually, 2019, I met them, and then we have the conversation. So the website where you can see Hey Zero is called X Confession. So it's this very unique type of filmmaking. On this website, you can register and confess about your sex fantasy, and then if you're picked up, filmmakers will make a short movie based on your confession. So this short movie was based on one of them, and about how sex encounters could happen of human and AI and between AI. So especially, I wrote the script during the first lockdown, and at that time, almost everybody has to stay home and get along with themselves, or if you have partner, be with your partner, and so somehow we spent so much time with a smartphone and computer, and I was totally fascinated by the possibility could happen between us and AI. And also, a lot of people also refer to a film by Spike Jonze, Her. So in that film, I really like that film, but somehow it is very much male perspective on Samantha, whose voice was performed by Scarlett Johansson. So I want to flip this relationship and or make it to be more equal relationship. And in the end, we casted Romeo and Lucy. They are both great performer, and we shot it. And it was also got very good feedback, especially even in the Chinese-speaking media. They also covered it. Yeah, so of course not on People's Daily or or China Daily or Global Times, but on some sex-positive media. And so I'm proud to be the first Chinese guest director of X Confession, and because their idea is to be ethical and female-friendly porn. So on one side, they want to promote porns which are more friendly for female to watch, not following the tradition of male gazing in the porn industry. On the other hand, they also try to make their cast and crew to be more diverse and featuring different kind of a body, different race. When we meet, it's like a house on fire. We have so much we agree, and it was a great pleasure to work with them.
And can you access X Confessions in China?
Unfortunately, it's blocked. You have to watch it with a VPN. But yeah, a lot of my friends has VPN. They also subscribe it and watch it.
Very nice. How is the sex positive community in China? Like, is it very much a digital underground situation, or are people able to talk about it in person? So
I would recommend for Chinese speakers, you should follow the work of Yami community. So they are a group of very powerful women and organizing events, workshops, and for sex pleasure, and they have articles writing and teaching you how to enjoy your own body. The founder Sam is a good friend of mine, but very often their website, their article would be censored because they post it on WeChat, public account of WeChat, and then once their account has been totally deleted by WeChat. And now every time they publish anything, they also did an interview with me and also with Erika Lust. They have to use a lot of trick to avoid the AI censorship. It's so ironic that talking about AI porn, they have to find different ways to avoid the AI censorship. But they have been doing a great work for the community. But of course, they also need to survive. So it's also a platform selling sex toy, and they have a course, they have a class to learn about your body. So I would say it's halfly on the ground, but they have their own strategy.
I was quite excited by what you told me and this observation right now in terms of, at least in the podcast world, the AI has not been able to catch up yet for this short period of time, which probably most definitely will be closing later. But the way that things are going outside of China, especially with COVID this year, it's just going into a very different world that we were living and occupying in the last few decades, where there was a bit more feeling of trust and openness in terms of sexuality and interaction. How is it going for you in this new lockdown, and how is your optimism for this coming period now that we're in the beginning of a new solstice?
I think the first lockdown, I enjoyed it quite much. And after a few weeks, I kind of get used to it. Of course, it's just so sad to see people dying, and some people even without a home can't really stay home. But for me, it was time to reflect myself and look into the world and being creative. So I spent a lot of time reading, writing, and watching films. So at that time I already say, oh, one day we will miss this period of time. And then the second lockdown, I became so busy. I think these are also stress that I give it to myself. I want to finish this, I want to do that, and I got this job and that streaming event. I have so many streaming events, but somehow this also a way to feed yourself. And a lot of streaming events also kindly at least offered me some honorarium, and because I know most of artists are not in good situation financially. So the second lockdown, I was enjoying more being productive, but not that much free time. But sex-wise, I think I also enjoy this time, this period of time that's not really have to be in touch with someone directly, but more sexually in mind. This is also my philosophy that kind of very maybe Confucius or Buddhism or Eastern kind of philosophy. I think I tried not to get addicted to something. Everything, even there's so many nice stuff, and sex is one of them. You have to have the ability to live without it for a while. And slowly I educated myself, get used to not having exact sex, but have a lot of imagination, and allowed myself to enjoy sex in different ways. For example, I've been writing 2 columns, and one is it's called 别的 in China, and it used to be Vice, the Chinese version of Vice. And so I have a column called 性游记, mostly writing about sex tourist, about sex experience of mine. And I every time I publish something, and got really quite a lot of people read it, and my friend also texted me about it. And I think it's a quite artistic way to enjoy sex energy from writing. And the other one is on a Hong Kong media called the Untitled, supposedly about the film and sex, but now also mostly about sex. And so for Untitled, so, because they are based in Hong Kong, so there is more space for me to write without censorship. For 别的, they are still mostly based on Weibo and WeChat, so they have to censor some stuff I wrote. But both of them are really giving me great platform. And so like this October, I created a series of film screening. And I literally meet audience who know about this because they want to see me because of reading my column on 别的. So I really appreciate this kind of opportunity, even make me feel communicate with other people during the lockdown time. So basically, I don't feel lonely at all.
I'm trying to bring in more discussions about Asian masculinity issues, because I think that's one intersection that is not talked about nearly as enough compared to what is happening, and it's quite invisible in terms of porn. And here we have in terms of Hey Zero, and I also wonder about, it's a bit different now, but I remember first a while back, maybe a year, I noticed like when you look at porn, there's a category called Asian man X female or Asian male white female. Both of these was first, it's not just a small category, but it had one of the most hated categories. It wasn't just unpopular, it was people were against it, you know? And at first I thought, oh, like maybe it's just crap or it's not interesting, or what is good or bad porn. I think it's more like, but the fact that people were very upset about it, I thought was very fascinating. Just the image of Asian male behaving sexually. Do you notice some of these aspects, like the way that Asian men are perceived as less sexual or different, like stereotypes?
Yeah, obviously. So there was research about how Asian men was represented in mainstream film industry. All the James Bond film and white superhero has girlfriend, but Jackie Chan and Jet Li, and when they are popular in Hollywood, but they never really even have a kiss with anyone in the film because the system doesn't allow them to, because they are Asian men was portrayed as non-sexual. Especially, I think maybe the queer word is slightly different. So either you are portrayed as not attractive at all, but there is also people who fetishize the Asian male in the queer community, so-called rice queen, to describe white guys who only love Asian guys. I think either way are kind of awful for me. So and but it is so hard to love someone without noticing their race, right? So I would also reflect about myself, and was it at a certain time I have a preference on certain race, or if not race, if maybe on certain hair color or shape of body or smell. These are all affecting me of my sex preference, but somehow I'm not following the traditional type of preference, and my type has been changing. So maybe I educated myself not to have a certain fixed type. So some days I may be into smaller guys, and some days I don't mind this tall person. But for a lot of people, they can only have sex with certain type of body, or they only love one kind of eyes color. Then I don't get it. I think it's such a shame for you to lock yourself in such a narrow box. And honestly, it's also not good for your sex life, because that means you have a less opportunity to get diverse range of people.
Don't you think there's a kind of an interesting correlation between sex and food and the way people have preference or not, or prejudice or not? I think somebody was making this observation that 97% of the most famous food critics are all Asian. And when I see a lot of Asian groups talking about Asian issues, a lot of times it's first talking mostly about food, not very much about sexuality. I don't know if that's just my own observational bias, but I do wonder, like, there are sometimes people that speaks about food the way that they also speak about sex. Like, I just like this kind of food. I don't try this other type of food. This is just what I like. And I don't know if you have this upbringing, but with my parents, in terms of food, it's the whole 不可以挑食. You cannot be picky. You have to eat everything. And when it comes to sexuality, sometimes I wonder if I try to push myself also with this kind of approach, try to try everything, How do I know I don't like it until I try it? I also find my preferences changing and depending on things. And there are sometimes things I don't like, maybe smell or thing, or maybe somebody I superficially find, wow, this is like my perfect fantasy. But then during the actual sexual experience, sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes a person that I thought, oh my God, this is never going to work, turns out to be the wildest sex ever, and vice versa. Somebody who I thought, wow, this is my ultimate fantasy, turns out to be such a disappointment. Do you ever get that?
Definitely very inspiring idea. I think regarding to food, partially the reason why in Asia we eat more kind of food is because we have such a long history of this big population but lack of food. So we have to
absolutely.
In China at least, my understanding, like the reason why the history of eating chicken feet was because in Chinatown, and they see all those chicken feet are thrown away. They could find different way to cook them and make it to be delicious, right? And different organs. But here in Europe, and they have been spoiled, and we have so much food. Why we eat those organs that look disgusting? But this made them to lose the joy of more diverse type of food. Maybe this is also they are spoiled with all the sex resource here and the openness. But somehow, the openness is also with being spoiled, it also narrow their mind. That's such a shame. On the other hand, I think it is true that in Asia we are so passionate about food. We want to make eating as art. Recently, I read one interview of Korean German philosopher. I don't know if you heard about him.
Yeah, it's my favorite. I read all his books. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was talking about the Berlin food, and he also analyzed with different culture, and I was totally fascinated by that. And he said, why? I love Berlin, I love Germany, the art and the traditional of philosophy, and love the language itself. I don't love the food here. In Asia, it's totally another narrative, and I think they totally. Yes, here they see food culture also quite differently compared with what we have in Asia, and I guess sex is also could be another thing.
Well, the theory that in Asian cultures, a lot of times there's, in terms of individual and human expression, so much of it is limited. Let's say you don't really sexually express yourself publicly, and also the range of expression with each other together. So it's so much of that energy is put into the ceremony and the action of food sharing. Whereas, the comparison, let's say maybe with Berlin, that there is so much other options, you can do drugs, you can go dance, you can have a nice play party, you can do fetish things. There's no time to eat. Who cares about eating? Let's get the fucking on. Let's get the more other stuff on. And it's almost like a different kind of expression.
Yeah, I do find that too. I do find that where there is more other fun things to do, and they don't develop a great food culture.
Yeah,
but maybe this is also reasonable that in China, people are so foodie because there is so much other discipline in life. You can't do this; it is taboo, and you can't do that, and that will be censored.
Yeah, I'm always a bit feeling like the outsider on both sides. Like with the Germans, I'm like, come on, let's go enjoy food properly, and please don't take me to a really crap Asian restaurant that you think is really great because it's your only Asian restaurant you've ever been to. But then with Asians, I'm like, like we always have good food. Let's talk about sex. Let's have an orgy. Let's do something crazy, and it's just, this. I think we have to find. I think it could be a very nice film concept now to explore, like the there's of course the classic Fan Popo, but to kind of bring this to today in terms of like the way food is played, how it is with each other, and also like maybe like a porn or sexual film about the range of sexuality that can be actually explored. Actually, another thought I had just now was like, in terms of different experiences of like people being spoiled or not. And do you notice that people that easily fetishized or good looking for a larger amount of people, younger, and then later on in life, they are not so adventurous as much because maybe they've just had so much pressure. And sometimes I find that people that had a more ugly duck, if you will, relationship to sexuality or space, they might have the kind of like need to develop, or I wonder like the types of people, like why there seems to be certain types of people that really go and explore about sexuality, and some people that just really don't,
So my observation is that a lot of younger people now are more vanilla.
I agree. Yes.
And so I was sometimes even shocked. So they could be, and maybe this is an age thing, and the age makes sense that they hasn't experienced that much. So they want to stay in their safe box. And I'm impressed how much older people can can open on the fetish side here, and a lot of them are quite experimental. I think maybe also because when you get old, you don't have that big market anymore, so you have to agree with more stuff that other people project on you, and maybe that is also it's complicated. So I don't know if we should feel sad or happy about when we get older, and but that could be one of the reasons. But I want just to react to your earlier question again, and we can, as people like us, we have a background, Asian background, and now living in a European society, and we can take out our advantage that we can enjoy both sides, the sex side, or multiple sides, the sex side and the party side, and different stuff. So that will be our advantage. So, and then with this globalization, I assume, and there will be more and more people like this, so we can have different perspective.
Yeah, that's why I get quite a lot of energy and wanting to find people like you and to have these conversations, because I think it's not really about being Asian or a specific ethnic side. I think it's just globalization, and more people are being forced to move or relocate, pushed out of certain things, and I think it's not even Asian issues. It's just issues of diaspora and trying to relate or find a community that is lost for them, a family that is no longer the same way that family has been.
And you know what? My next project with X Confession will be about food and sex.
Perfect.
So also
looking forward to
have a small forecast about it. And actually we meant to shoot it this year, but because of COVID and that one I wrote, there should be 10 extras on set, and that is not super COVID friendly to shoot right now. So we leave it for the next year.
Today's conversation was with Popo Fan. You can find out more of his work on popofan.net. This podcast is hosted and produced by myself, Ayoto Ataraxia. Art direction by Adam Ridgway. Web coding by Rafa Copiela. Music by Jesus Lastra. Sound extracts are from Fan Popo's film, Papa Rainbow, as well as Popo's shorts on RBB. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can help me grow by becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/AsianProvocation.